Welcome to Talent Tidbits, where we take a look at the news and issues affecting the world of recruitment and talent management. Today we have Ron Hetrick, former Bureau of Labor Statistics economist, 20-year former chief advising economist at the largest staffing company in the United States, and currently the designer of staffing products for Economic Modeling Specialists International, better known as IMSI. Ron comes to us from his home in Jacksonville, Florida. Ron, thanks for being here.
Thank you very much for allowing me to be here today. Hopefully we have some really cool things to talk about.
I think we do. So this is a cool thing to talk about. So on the show today, we're going to do a segment that I like to call So What, Who Cares? We get a lot of super cool official labor data coming out of the federal government every month. And every so often, we get a jobs report like we got in March, usually a super boring thing. But I got to tell you, this March jobs report really knocked the socks off people. Lots of worthy headlines in March. So on the top of the order, the big news is the United States added 916,000 new payroll jobs in the month of March. And that was about a 240% jump from what we got in February. This is due mostly to the easing of COVID restrictions across the nation and wider availability of COVID vaccine shots. We added jobs across the board, which is great, but it looks like leisure and hospitality really stuck out.
Yeah.
So Ron, you've had some time to look at this whole thing and digest it, see what the economy is doing and how it's responded. What the heck are you seeing? What stands out? What's the story?
Okay, well, first off, we have had some overriding things going on for basically most of last year and the beginning of this year. And the biggest one being that the labor force participation rate, which plunged during COVID, is not returning back. And every time we talk to staffing companies, we talk to private companies, the one thing that we hear over and over and over again is we cannot find people anywhere. So when you see this report come in that we add nearly 1 million jobs back, I mean, first thing for me was just utter shock because I wasn't actually quite sure where they were actually getting these people. What's amazing to me is we saw labor force participation rates drop naturally for people who were in that boomer population. They got afraid. They decided to accelerate their retirements. We do know that they greatly accelerated their retirements. But what's really amazing is that the labor force participation rate amongst prime age men, so men 25 to 54 years old, that also plunged. That came back a little bit, and it hasn't moved in a long, long time. So somehow we are adding jobs back to this economy, despite the fact that there are still so many prime age people who really aren't interested in working at this particular point in time for reasons. It could be from assistance that they're getting. It could be a fear aspect. It could be virtual schooling. That we really don't know, but we do know that the economy wants to grow way more than what you saw. That million that we had, it should have been it could have been 2 to 3. We still have a gap to get back to where we were. And a lot of that is just because people aren't fully returning back to work.
Interesting. So what parts of the economy are coming back? What parts are not? Is there anybody who kind of stands out? I mean, I mentioned, was it leisure and hospitality?
Yeah. Well, what's back, strangely enough, is construction. Construction's almost recovered all of its losses. That is an incredibly good thing. Like, I can't emphasize that enough. If you go back to various recoveries, construction is always a really good foreteller of what's to come. I think we know that we had a really low housing inventory. There was a lot of concern about, construction companies couldn't get employees, so they didn't really want to build affordable houses. They wanted to build expensive houses. So the fact that you see these employment levels coming back up means that we're going to get building in all kinds of levels. And when you get that going, I mean, we already have this economic machine that, we grabbed that hose and we twisted it. And now that hose is untwisting, and you've got construction on top of that. So it's a very, very healthy kind of economy that we're going to have in 2021. No doubt about it. If there wasn't the limitation of labor, you would see one of the greatest economic years, I believe, in history.
Interesting. So where is everybody?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's an interesting thing. And unfortunately, it's become, kind of political. But when we talk to people, when we talk to employers, it's funny, just even my own cousin who has a place, the checks have definitely caused a problem. What's happened is people are just kind of substituting that out for fully re-engaging. That's absolutely occurring in warehousing jobs. We hear it a lot in manufacturing. We're not hearing it as much. Retail and restaurants are coming back. But if you look at this, and this is what's really fascinating, the last month that they put out job openings, that was for February, just lags a couple months. We had 7.3 million job openings, which is an absolutely insane amount. And so what happens is the Bureau of Labor Statistics has something called the beverage curve. And what the beverage curve does is it looks at the amount of job openings and it looks at the amount of people kind of unemployed. And if you look at that, if you look at the amount of job openings you have, this job opening rate, our actual unemployment rate is 3.8%. Now, the one you see published is 6.2%. But the actual unemployment rate is probably around 3.8%. So when employers are looking at this saying, why can't we find anybody right now? It's because you actually that unemployment rate is a complete fabrication at this particular point in time. It's a result of a number of factors. One of the factors being, in the question you just asked, if you are afraid to return to work, you are allowed to still collect pandemic unemployment assistance. Yeah. We still have 12 million people collecting some form of either pandemic unemployment assistance or pandemic emergency unemployment compensation. And when those numbers need to get to zero before we're ever going to see everything truly take off again.
Like back to full participation?
I think so. At least to get that labor force participation rate back up the 1.5, 2 percentage points that it needs to get.
Yeah, we hadn't even talked about this earlier, but I know Janet Yellen had mentioned something about kind of inflating that number because of how many working mothers had left the workforce, and maybe specific one of these talking about working mothers in the future, because I think that's a huge part of the labor force that kind of got, I hate to use this word disenfranchised, and we need to get
about 2.5 million women.
2.5 million.
If we look at the labor force participation rate, and there's actually, the Bureau looks at things as women as a head of household or women as just in a household with children. If you look at those things and you see those drops, I mean, you can account for roughly 1.8 to 2.5 million women who have disappeared, not let alone the 3 million men that are gone for reasons that we really don't believe have anything to do with virtual schooling, but may have a lot to do with the assistance checks that went out.
Interesting. Cool. So I'm hearing a lot of chatter in the world of fast food and quick service restaurants. So let me pick your brain on that. A couple of friends have contacted me recently and said, hey, you work in the jobs thing. Why can't I hire anybody? There were a couple of things that stuck out to me, at least here. 280 something thousand in the food service space in the March report, and restaurants, specifically kind of the QSR, the quick service fast food guys, added 175,000 jobs in March, which is still 1.8 million away from what the sector had before COVID, if I'm reading this right.
That's correct. Yeah.
And what was kind of the weird thing was quick service and fast casual, as they were calling it, did not have the same pain as everybody else. It looked like they had a precipitous drop last April, and then they've been kind of doing this ever since.
Yeah.
The takeout and everything like that. But employment levels are still 250,000 jobs less than they were.
Yeah.
Where are the rest of these jobs? We've gained 75,000 of them, but now we're spiking at 175.
Yeah, it's interesting. Last week, there were a number of articles that came out. In fact, one person did a huge service to everyone and actually took and grabbed all these headlines and put them together. And they are restaurants that have been trying to hire back and they cannot find a staff to do it. In fact, a lot of restaurants were choosing to remain in the curbside model because they couldn't find staff to actually open the restaurant up. Or if you think about it, I mean, you're not only opening and staffing a restaurant for a couple of days. I mean, a lot of these restaurants, if you're going to go to the problem of reopening, you want at least a 6 day a week model. Yeah. And that requires quite a lot of employees. What's really interesting about this is that what we have seen, actually, it's a phenomenal curve. And I just wrote an article about this that's going to be coming out soon, is this willingness, deliberate choosing to go part-time. So if we look at people who are doing part-time voluntarily versus people who have to do it, those two curves are heading in violently different directions. So especially amongst men who are choosing to work part-time over full-time jobs is a number that's grown by 1 million in the past 2 years. So you have a lot of men who they're working in restaurants, versus going back to their manufacturing job, versus going back to maybe a warehousing type of a job, because the pay levels, have gotten, as there's a number of restaurants, even in fast food, that are doing like $15 an hour. So if you were working in a warehouse at $12 an hour at a 40-hour work week, you can now work 30-hour work weeks, get home, play your video games, have a flexible schedule. You're making almost the same amount that you were making before. And what we see is a lot of people are making those decisions when we look at the data. So I actually think restaurants are going to end up faring better, but anybody who's employing anybody below $20 an hour absolutely is being affected by the assistance checks that went out. That's substituted for weeks and weeks worth of salary. I remember one person in particular said that when the last round of checks went out, they had 19 people quit the same day. They were just like, look, this is just, why would I do this? Like, why would I work when I can do this?
They have other options to go after now because we've added so many jobs.
Yeah, and I think that as we stop that, once the assistance stops, then I think you'll just see, like I said, I think you'll see insane growth. And so a lot of these things that are stuck are not stuck because of any economic problem. And I know people love to go to hey, X number of restaurants shut down, during COVID. And I'm not denying that. I think New York City certainly felt a lot of that. California's certainly been feeling a lot of that. But at the end of the day, the people are incredibly inventive. And the second somebody sees an open spot, retail spot, they're going to jump in. And what we're seeing is the fact that, like I said earlier, and I want to hammer that point home, we have 7.3 million job openings right now. Like, this is not an economy that is missing jobs. It's an economy that's missing workers. And I don't want anybody mistaking that.
Right on. But you said something that made me think too. Saw an article, or maybe I heard it on NPR or something the other day, that said something to the effect that Walmart is planning to move their part-time retail associates to full-time. Does that go along with that idea? Is that the idea of underemployed to full employed?
I don't know if it's necessarily that. In this day and age, especially when we look at these underemployed numbers, they don't flesh out as much. I think a lot of people wish that it probably was a bigger story than what it is. I actually question the move just because we don't see a propensity of people who are desiring full-time work. So this idea that you're going to convert these associates from part to full-time seems to fly in absolute contrary evidence to everything that we're seeing of people who are desiring part-time work. Is really crazy, the data that's out there as to why that is the case. But this is a different generation. It's a different mindset. I won't even try to claim that I can explain all of it. But what I will tell you is that the data does not lie. I mean, we definitely see this transference of people moving away from full-time to part-time. There's a lot else going on there. Generational wealth being inherited. A lot of people don't need to work like they used to. I think COVID accelerated some things that were coming. It just really turned the volume knob up, like just tremendously. Versus, I think you were going to see these things taking place over the next 5 years. But what COVID did is it just slammed that down. So will we ever go back to normal? I don't believe so, because if you go back, this is so critically important. If anybody hears anything, hear the one thing. The month before the COVID shutdowns occurred, we were at the lowest unemployment rate non-wartime in history. So if I hear people going, well, we just need to get back. And I'm like, get back to the lowest unemployment rate in non-wartime history.
That's right.
So in other words, you're talking about going from something that's really horrible to something that's even more horrible if we actually get back to it. So, this is a different world now. There's just not enough people. And I think people are going to have to start getting really creative in the way they fill the jobs, the way they do their scheduling. I think you're going to have to see all kinds of innovation. How are you going to staff a plant? How are you going to staff a restaurant? It's going to be different than how it looked before, because there's no people coming. These aren't robots. We're not going to magically invent them. We're running out of people. And what are we going to do as a result of it? I mean, people have to do something different.
Yeah. All right. So then that begs the question, specifically around some of these fast food, retail, whatever it is, what can employers do to stand out from the pack, to get ahead, to recruit, to actually bring people on board and make them successful, long-term, efficient, effective hires?
Yeah, I wish I had that magic bullet, and then I'd probably be really crushing it in life. But I will say, I'll tell you this much. Now, I've spent a lot of my career in the past couple of years speaking on this particular subject. And the things that I would say, and I spoke to a manufacturing trade association about 2 months ago, and what I told them was find the passion that you have for why you started your company, because I was talking to owners of companies, and I'm like, find it, what is it about that job that's really awesome? What is it that makes a difference? And you've got to instill that passion when you're interviewing people. We've got to stop this concept of somebody comes in for a job, okay, so tell me about yourself, blah, 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 blah. It's like it's almost like speed dating. You have a chance to sell yourself in a very short amount of time. Sell yourself. What's amazing about your company? And if there's nothing amazing about your company, find something amazing or transform your company or do something.
Paychecks are stable.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to, it's not pandering per se, but with these younger generations, with Gen Z, with the younger parts of millennials, they really want to feel like they're doing something. And, just anything that you can do to talk about the value that you bring. I don't care if you're fast food, retail, or anything, talk about the value that you bring, talk about the things that you're excited about. And, so that's the first part. Get people in the door, get people in. And then I'm going to hammer this point home. Don't let them go. Like, don't just let people quit all the time. Like this concept that the old days, the mentality was somebody quits and you go get another one. Like that's life. But you can't do that anymore because getting another one may not happen. So you got to do everything you can to retain the people that you have. I don't mean that you let them show up to work high or drunk, even though I think there's employers doing that right now. What I'm saying is don't let sloppy attrition occur. Don't let bad managers drive people out of your company. Don't let dumb reasons, hey, a person couldn't get off on Saturday, so they're just going to quit their job now. It's like, what can you do? What kind of flexibility can you bring? How do you reward? Let's say you get somebody and after a couple of weeks, you realize they're really good. How can you change their world? How can you make it look different for them than the average schmo that's working on that job? Like, how do you treat your better people better? How do you put them in a position to reward them quicker? You've got to think faster now. You've got to do more creative things.
I feel like you're saying that it went from a buyer's market to a seller's market, right? Here's time. Like now the employers the employees kind of have the power over
They have all the power.
Yeah. Interesting.
They really do. And what I think as well, when you think about that, if employees have power, then if you think about it, then it's a matter of saying, then how do I get really good at bringing a good person in? Because, excuse me, if I do bring someone in and they do look solid, how fast can I get my training regimens up? How many things can I get rid of as requirements for jobs that I can train, that I can become excellent at, that if you start with my company in 2 days, I can have you firing on all cylinders. Put effort towards it. I was talking when I was talking about that manufacturing company, those companies, one of the things I told them was like, deliberately sit down and think of these things. As you're sitting around talking about who you're going to sell to this year and what new products you're going to launch, also have a strategy for what you're going to do to acquire and retain the talent that you have. Yeah. It's not going to happen by accident. The world's different now. And what's going on right now is not ever going to change. Like I said, even if LFPRs recover back a little bit, we have an economy that wants millions more workers than we're ever going to be able to generate. So you're always going to be fighting for talent. You're always going to have to be examining, are you using talent efficiently? And the only way you really do this is by sitting down and coming up with a deliberate strategy.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Ron, I appreciate it. This was enlightening. And I think we determined, so what? It's a big deal. There's a lot happening in our economy. I think we're going to see a lot more just dynamism in the economy over the next 4, 5, 6 months as summer comes and more people can kind of enter the workforce. So we'll have to check back in. But thanks again. This is Ron Herrick, economist with IMSI, coming to us from Jacksonville, Florida. Ron, appreciate it. And we will talk soon.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed today. Have a great one.
Okay. See ya. Welcome back to Talent Tidbits. I'm Michael Odell, and now we go to the other side of the story. So earlier we talked about the March jobs report saying that the U.S. economy added 976,000 jobs. One of the big standouts was quick service restaurants and food service nationwide. Somewhere between 176,000 jobs were added to that sector, but the restaurant industry is saying, where are all the workers? Joining me today is Jeff Pegg, Denver area director for RB American. RB American is the largest operator of Arby's franchises in the nation, part of the Flynn Corporation, which operates another 450 other stores, Taco Bell's, Panera's, Pizza Huts, and Wendy's. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Good morning. How are you?
Good. And you are joining us from?
Right now I'm in Aurora, Colorado. Quincy and Buckley store.
Quincy and Buckley. And you had mentioned this is one of the busiest stores.
It's top 10 busiest stores in the company. Yeah.
Interesting. And how many stores do you oversee?
Right now I'm overseeing 8 in Denver,
stores.
in the South Denver. Yeah.
You know what's amazing to me is that somebody hired you and actually pays you with that much responsibility.
Surprises me every day.
Full disclosure, Jeff is my cousin on my dad's side. Miss you, little Jeffrey. I hope all is well.
Sometimes it is.
Sometimes it is. So cousin Jeff.
Yes.
We noticed, so restaurants are having a heck of a time hiring. In your 8 stores in the Denver area, what the heck are you experiencing these days?
Staff shortages. So talking about the March jobs reports, like I said, yes, all these jobs are available. The question is, where are the people? And as we were kind of looking at it, we're kind of going back to right now we're in a struggle, I guess you could say, up against the government, which is kind of where we're at the point. The government is paying people a lot of money to just stay home and not get a job, which is, backing us up into a corner. Something that we've been open through this whole ordeal. So where other restaurants had closed due to, restrictions, you can't have anybody in your lobby, you don't have a drive-through, whatever the issue was, we've been open through the whole thing. So with COVID cases up, down, doesn't matter. When you talk about people on the front line, that's what these people are in these restaurants. And it is stressful, and it's a lot on you and on your family. And I know what the government is trying to do, but it's also just putting us further back from trying to get the economy back to what we want and all want.
In your 8 stores, how many openings do you have right now across those stores, do you think? How many people do you need?
I could probably use 60 people.
60 people across 8 stores right now?
Mm-hmm.
So wow. Okay, I thought you would say, 20. What are you doing now then? Do you change hours? How do you?
We've had to adjust. I mean, like I said, it went off of, because we have to comply with what the governor says, and then it goes off the county, and I mean, it's a lot every day. If a COVID case comes in, it's just a lot to it. And you're in this too. But I mean, on average, I would say I probably need, like in the store I'm at currently, we should have 35 to 40 employees, and I think we have 18.
Oh wow, okay. So looking back, like pre-COVID to today, what percentage of your job was about recruiting, pre-COVID, the good old days, versus what it is now?
It's always been a part. I try. Yes, we have our management team. It's their responsibility for hiring and all that, but we've got a recruiting department. I've got, if I have time, if the store's struggling, I will sit down and just plow through resumes. I've got hiring events. Like I said, I've got a call tomorrow with recruiting and everything else to go over everything that we have been doing and what the plans are in the future.
Yeah.
And it just changes, and the whole landscape has changed over the last year. But I'd say it's probably gone from, before it was probably 15%, just helping whenever I could. But we had applicants, like I said, at the store I'm at currently.
Makes it different, right?
Oh, it's night and day. So the store I'm at right now, The reason why I'm here is this store we used to get 20 to 30 applications a week. Right now we're lucky to get 5 a month.
Wow.
So it's just dropped.
That's crazy, man.
It's ridiculous. And except on the first of the month. So
Yeah.
on the first of the month, when people have to re-up for unemployment and that kind of stuff, I can go into my talent or whatever we're using, and I've got 200 applications that day.
Interesting.
So it's rough.
Yeah.
Because it just shows you that we need people, and we want to hire people, and we're working on compensation. We're trying to find ways to be creative to get people in here.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. You
They
mentioned
don't want to.
you mentioned the hiring events. QSR Magazine had an article a couple days ago, and it talked about. I actually wrote down. It was all these things that folks are doing. Taco Bell, IHOP, Firehouse, and tons of others are doing these huge nationwide hiring events. You got Chick-fil-A and Chipotle introducing or increasing the availability and participation in like their tuition assistance programs.
Yep.
And then you have the elephant in the room, Amazon, who is opening warehouses on every corner
And see, that's kind of the other thing that we're running into now is we were never in competition with Amazon or Target or anything else. We were in competition with McDonald's across the street or Good Time or whatever, other restaurants, right? Now I'm in competition with, okay, well, I can go in the same parking lot right across the street and make $15 an hour. And it's like, well, and that's where we have to sit down as leaders in the company and figure out what are we going to do, because we just lost 5 people yesterday to whatever, and it's just a constant. It doesn't stop, and it's not being negative. It's just how it's always always been rough in Denver.
Yeah.
But this just made it even more exciting.
Yeah.
So
tactically, what are you guys doing? Are you increasing wages? What are you doing?
right now we're looking at like hiring incentives, like you're here for a certain amount of time.
Yeah, that's cool.
You get in for, get X amount of dollars. You hire on a friend, or you have a friend that comes, the same thing.
Total bonuses.
So, right, we're looking at all that, but then at the same time, because there's other companies that are doing that, but it all comes down to we're going to have to raise wages.
All right, so last question.
Mm-hmm.
How do you guys make that beef and cheddar so darn delicious?
I guess the question is, does your beef and cheddar in Nashville, does it have Red Ranch on it?
Yeah, like the Arby's sauce, right?
It's not an Arby's sauce.
Well,
Everybody
yeah, the creamy Arby's. Yes.
But it's like a French dressing.
Yeah.
Is the closest thing to it.
Yes.
But in some states, so if you go to the South, that sauce is not on the beef and cheddar.
Really?
So if you go across the country, it depends on what part of the country that you're in. If you order a beef and cheddar, you might get the Red Ranch sauce, and you might not. So if we have stores that are off the highway where people are traveling whatever, and they stop and get a beef and cheddar, and they've never had it with the Red Ranch, and they get it and they're like, what is this?
What happened? Yeah.
Or the other way around.
Yeah.
Where's this? Oh, well, we don't have that. Man. So, but yeah, it's not Arby's sauce. It's we call it Red Ranch.
Red Ranch. That's so good.
It's good stuff. It's good stuff. So, yeah.
Well, thanks for being with us. I know you have a busy day ahead and a busy store. I'll let you get back to work, but come visit us.
I know.
Come see us.
I want to. I will.
All right. All my love to the fam.
Will do. You too. Tell everybody hello.
I'll do.
All right. Bye.